Hello and welcome to Produced By. Just quickly before we begin, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it by joining our Patreon. You can choose from a list of memberships and will receive some exciting rewards. Thank you, and back to the episode. Hello Marco, thank you for joining us today and welcome to this special episode.
Hello mate, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Marco, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Marco Gifuni. I'm a 3D generalist, character designer, currently freelancing. I'm very fortunate to be able to work in the film industry and commercial and ping pong between the two. I would say my forte is concept art and character design and modeling side, which is something I really enjoy doing. And I've been, again, really fortunate to take part in projects that have been released in cinemas and TV, and as well as working with some of the best studios in the market in the VFX sphere. And yeah, it's super hard to give you a summation of what I do, what I am, without sounding, I don't know, somewhat weird.
No,
but
it sounds all good. We'll dive into more details because it sounds exciting. But first, let's start with your background. So, where do you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you can hear from my accent, I'm Italian. Whatever fragments of Italian accent I've got remaining in me. I moved to UK 14 years ago. Actually, it's 14 years today.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
14 years ago, I decided to make the jump. And I moved from, I was living in Rome at the time, but I was born and raised into this tiny town / village called Foggia, and in the south of Italy, which again didn't have as many, things to explore, or, I wasn't surrounded by loads of things to do and stuff. And I suppose the thing that, my comfort blanket has always been illustration. I've been doing illustration since I can remember, really. And this is something that kind of slowly took me to the path of pursuing digital arts in 2003. Before then, again, I was aggressively trying to do illustration wherever I could. Actually, I did graffiti as well from the age of 14.
Was it legal or illegal?
I'm not sure I should answer that, but yeah, no, it's from the age of 14 to say 16, 17, I've been doing graffiti. And again, that's on the same vein of I liked illustration so much that I started, diverting into other kind of branches and stuff. And the accent was always into monsters, creature design, characters, which is the thing I do to this day as well. The majority of the things I do kind of include character design and monsters and things. And this is something I've been doing all my life. And when I started to, get a sense that there was something like graphic design and illustration I can do in a digital aspect, that's what attracted me the most. In 2003, I decided to move to Rome, and I was 19. I've been doing this for 21 years, because I'm going to be 40 in a few weeks.
It's some experience.
Yeah, and I remember, the very first, step I moved in digital art is because a friend of mine told me, "Oh, there's this program that does 3D text. It's amazing." And then that program was Cinema 4D, which is a program I use to this day. And it's so reductive to say it does 3D text, but it's just. But yeah.
And when you moved to Rome, was it because there weren't any options or career progressions in a town you were from?
Yes, because the place I was, it could sound harsh, but I was unfortunate to be born and raised in. Not only didn't have as many, external impulses for me to grow as a person, but even as a, professional and stuff. And in general, Italy is not a country that tends to reward creative jobs. They're not seen as something that produces objective stuff. So, they're a bit reticent to pay for something that you don't really materially deliver.
Mhm.
Why are you giving me? It's just an illustration. It's just, I'm not going to pay for that.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that they still have. Again, less than the past, but that's the general kind of mindset they have. Creative jobs are not as taken into consideration as other jobs could be.
But it surprises me a bit considering its rich industry of design, automobiles, perfumes, and stuff like that. So I wouldn't really expect that.
Yeah, absolutely. See, that's the thing, because Italy has been the avant-garde for art for millennia. But at the moment, this is not. When I say at the moment, in the last, say, 50 years, this has been less and less, because obviously all the fashion houses have been bought by other countries. For example, Benetton. I don't know if you know it. They've been bought by France, I think. I need to check that, but they're not owned by Italian owners and stuff. And in general, the sentiment is that graphic design, digital art is not, in terms of the scale of values, it's not as important as other jobs. I remember the only interview that I've ever had in Italy was for I can't say the client, but basically it was for a news agency, like one of the most famous news agencies in Italy. And I remember in the interview, they weren't that impressed by my portfolio or what I was proposing. They were just keen on knowing if I had a driving license. And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean a driving license? And the person that was interviewing me said, well, if something happens at midnight, say, you should be able to come here with your own car and do the design stuff and go back home, which is like graphic designer 24/7, which was very weird. And since at the time I still don't. I didn't have a driving license. I didn't get the job. So, it is such a strange thing to take into consideration having a driving license. For an interview.
And do you feel like it's been getting better to now appreciate more these creative industries, or it's the same or getting worse?
Granted, I'm not aware of what's going on in Italy anymore. To a larger extent, but as far as I know, obviously, it is much better than it was 14 years ago. And 14 years ago, it was to a level that you're definitely not going to pay the bills if you decide to pursue this career. So it's up to you. I remember when I was in uni, there was this underlying sentiment of, okay, even if we find a job when we leave the uni, this is going to be tough. We're not going to be millionaires. So I don't know if the situation has changed. I can tell you that possibly the film industry is in the exact same state, probably a bit better. But again, we're not. It's not comparable to the English market, the American market. It's just not the avant-garde in terms of digital productions. There are definitely a few studios that are doing really great work, but it's such a smaller scale, and in terms of wages, they're not comparable. It's just
it's a bit surprising and sad if you consider it's even a rich cinema history, right? With plenty of big films.
Absolutely.
I remember at uni we studied history of Italian cinema and plenty of great movies.
And in Rome, I used to live near the place that's called Cinecittà. I don't know if you ever heard. Is where Federico Fellini used to shoot these movies like Cabiria and movies like this.
Yeah.
I think Pompeii was shot there as well. And it was this amazing place. It's just imagine Universal Studios, but in Rome. That in the 50s, 60s, and possibly part of the 70s was like the excellence in terms of movies. You would pay to shoot and record there and stuff. Obviously, that's changed. And that's because they have stopped funneling money into the arts. In general, the Italian government is not that keen. I remember this happened more than 15 years ago, so it's something that stuck with me. I remember the Minister of Culture one day, when asked why Italy is not sponsoring, art projects and films and things like this, he was so upset. He basically replied, "Try and make a sandwich with a Divine Comedy," meaning, I mean, the Divine Comedy, as amazing as it is not going to give you, food to put on your plate and stuff. It's just, and that kind of gives you a glimpse of what they really think about art and crazy pursuits. It's just, I mean, as amazing as they are, you're not going to pay the bills with them. Which is the total opposite, obviously, that the rest of in UK, obviously, this is not the general sentiment. So,
yeah, it's unfortunate. It doesn't kind of progress from its history. But anyway, how did you find your education in Rome then?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved to Rome, it was such a culture shock because, again, I was coming from this tiny town. Again, I keep calling it town/village, but there's so much to say about that place. I mean, it's just, it kind of stunts your growth in a sense because there is nothing. It's got nothing to offer. So the only thing I had is just this stubbornness of draw. I was drawing and sketching every day. And when I moved to Rome, it was such a culture shock because, I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but in Italy, each region has got its own dialect. So even the way you say things is different. If you go, say, for example, to Lazio, which is the region where Rome is, and I was from Puglia, which is from the south. So even behaviors and movements and gestures and stuff, they're completely different. So it was like such a culture shock for me. And I ended up staying there, and I ended up doing this super long course in architecture and 3D design. And the thing that they were trying to preach the most is learn AutoCAD. You need to learn AutoCAD. Now, for the ones that are not aware, AutoCAD is this super obsolete architecture program, which basically produces CADs, which are really, precise models. At the time, you didn't even have options. You have to literally write options. And we're talking about YouTube just started to, being diffused. MSN was the way of communication. So we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have social media. We had MySpace. So yeah, we did have social media. MySpace.
It's even old for me. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, exactly. I was telling you, you must have been actually. I think you skipped the whole era of MySpace. I mean, and MySpace was super cool. Again, I feel so old now, but MySpace was really cool because you could...
I think it was just dying when I was kind of getting online.
Exactly. MySpace was really cool because you could customize it, and I mean, I still don't understand how Facebook managed to trump MySpace because MySpace was really cool. Again, you can have your own MySpace, you can customize it and everything. And in a matter of months, it just went away. But again, YouTube wasn't that...
Sense of nostalgia.
Yeah, it is a bit. You're right. But I remember that when I started to approach digital programs, and again, I used to fight the fact that my teachers and professors wanted to spoon feed me CAD programs, which I already found obsolete at the time. We're talking about 2003. And I was the only one in my course that was using Cinema 4D. And everyone was like, well, what are you doing with Cinema 4D? What is this? And I mean, most of them basically dropped out, and I'm still using Cinema 4D. So, and again, at the time, I remember I had to buy a book. It was like the Bible of Cinema 4D was this big, and it was in Italian.
Encyclopedia.
Yeah. And because there were no tutorials. I remember the very first studio that I worked for in UK. They didn't even know what Cinema 4D was. I remember they were saying, I don't know, there was a guy that came here that was using this program, but we're not really sure. We're not doing motion design. So yeah, it was cool at the uni. If anything, because I was doing my thing, I was always producing characters. I've got characters I used to produce in 2004, 2005. And again, there was a bit of an overshoot from what I was doing in graffiti. In graffiti, tends to do puppets and this really, weird characters and stuff, which is something I've always done. Even when I was in primary school, I remember my parents used to say, "You always do monsters," which is, I don't know. That's what I liked.
But actually, I agree with you. I find monsters really cool as well.
Absolutely.
Because it's something where you can use your creativity and something that never been done before, and it just looks awesome.
Absolutely, yeah, no, I totally agree. They've got an added value, and this is why people like Rick Baker, and Aristotelic Contest. They're all super. Their work is super attractive because they've got an added value. You're not just doing anatomy. Now you're adding stuff on top, which is something that not everyone can do or is able to do. And I've always found it super interesting and super hard to do because again, you have to come up with your own interpretation and your own concept. And it's definitely a task.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you before when you mentioned that Rome was culture shock. Was it also because there were international people and students as well, or was it just people from different areas of Italy?
No, you'd be surprised. Well, at the time, we had one international student in the whole university. So just one.
Oh, really?
Yes. Italy is very insular. I don't know at the moment, but at the time, we're talking 2003 again. It wasn't as, culturally diverse, let's say, as it could be now. Again, I have no data now, so I'm quite sure the situation has changed. But at the time, it was literally just I was surrounded by Italian people, and I remember whenever we saw tourists in Rome, we could recognize they were not Italian because they were like wearing t-shirts and shorts in November. And for an Italian, like, why do it? You're wearing a shirt. For an Italian, that's not viable. But yeah, no.
Today it's full of tourists, isn't it?
Yeah, no. Rome has always been full of tourists. In fact, there are
overcrowded
pubs and stuff that only tourists go to. If you go and do a pub crawl in Rome, they're going to take you to spots that are specific for Brits, for Germans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in this, I don't know if the situation has changed. Most likely it has, but I wasn't exposed to different cultures at the time. I mean, just to give you a glimpse of how I was at the time, I never tried any other cuisine but the Italian one before I was 20. So I never tried mustard before I was 19. I mean, the Italian culture is very insular, which again sounds strange.
But at least you had one of the best cuisines in the world.
That's
Although
true.
you haven't tried any others, it was still such a delicious one.
That's true. I used to say that, then I tried Spanish cuisine, and that blew my mind to a point that, it's now number 2. But Italians are not going to like this podcast, mate. But yeah, no. So apart from that, again, moving to Rome has been such an eye opener because not only I got to again talk to other people, and my teachers were super. Well, some of them were up for disclosing the secrets of the industry and stuff. but it was nice to meet other people and kind of, you know, get off my shell and stuff. And yeah, that was my first approach to digital art.
And did you already know back then that you wanted to focus on film industry or VFX?
No, I didn't even know what VFX was. I mean, we're talking about a 19-year-old that is just moving his first steps in 3D. I didn't even touch animation for the first year or two. It's just because I only knew this thing produces 3D, you know, objects. And I soon found out when I moved to London that my knowledge of 3D programs wasn't that, you know, advanced, because I moved to London when I was 25, 24, something like that. And there were 19-year-olds that were doing laps around me. It's just, they were so advanced. And obviously, because I mean, the good thing in Britain, I suppose, is the fact that you get introduced to the workforce quite early, which in Italy is not as common. You usually don't work until you finish the university. In Italy, it's called a piece of paper. You need to get a piece of paper. You need to get a piece of paper. This mantra. You have to have a diploma. You have to have something to show.
Yeah, we have something similar in the Czech Republic.
Yeah,
it's like you need to get this diploma to help you in the career.
Absolutely, yeah. It's exactly the same in Italy. Again, I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. I grew up saying I want to be a graphic designer, and then I became a graphic designer. So, this is a bit boring. So I progressed like that. I mean, at the time, I wasn't really a defined, you know, professional. I was just doing a bit of everything. I was doing a bit of vector art. I was doing a bit of illustration. I was doing a bit of 3D, mostly 3D. 3D has always been, I would say, 60, 70% until it took over. But yeah, I didn't even know about VFX. Again, my examples of VFX were very poor at the time. Even my teachers, they used to do VFX in Italian post-productions company. It wasn't mind-blowing stuff. It wasn't like, oh wow, I'd love to do that.
I guess also because after year 2000 it was still in its infancy, so it wasn't as developed as these days.
When I was at, my first year uni, the Matrix was released. I think Reloaded, and blew the minds of basically
mind-blowing
everyone. Yeah, exactly. I remember people were going to the exams because you can do a presentation at the exams, and they had their usual letters falling animation at the exam, which is so tacky. It was like, why are you doing that? But it's just to show that they could do it. And again, it was mind-blowing, as you said. But I couldn't rationalize, oh, this is VFX, I can do that. How do I do that? It's just, the step from I do 3D and that can be applied to that, it was just too wide a gap for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you remember some films from your childhood that had the biggest impact on you?
I would say the one that probably left. First of all, probably the biggest one, first one I've seen was Ghostbusters. But again, you can't really talk about digital side of things with Ghostbusters and I'm going to be checked on this. I think it was ILM. I'm not exactly sure. But again, the digital side of things was very low. It was more practical, and this is what I love the most. It's like monsters. It's just let's model this thing, let's bring it to life. And the very first, I would say, digital products that really left a mark was Jurassic Park. I think it was 94. Yes, somebody sold 94. But yeah, Jurassic Park was amazing.
No, it's still such amazing film even these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It really holds a really good. You can't believe. I remember seeing a documentary, the way they moved the dinosaurs, and they had to move them from a really, really low res model and they couldn't even see the high resolution version as they were animated.
Mhm.
And they were taking like days to compute the animations. Just mind blowing stuff. And Toy Story, of course, that was probably
Oh, yes.
when things got kind of achievable. Because obviously, as soon as you rendered stuff, I mean, the render side of things at the time wasn't mind blowing. I would say, paradoxically, Jurassic Park was much more realistic than Toy Story. But rendering stuff in 2003 looked very much like Toy Story. I mean, Toy Story had no glitz and glam in terms of comp or render. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was really interesting to see as well. Yes.
And I think also it was so successful, Toy Story. I'm not gonna don't wanna lie, but didn't it even won Academy Award or something
The
like that?
first one, yeah, possibly, yeah. Those were
Because
the
it was
Steve
like a
Jobs.
first groundbreaking. I read some books, I think about from John Lasseter or Ed Catmull, and about Pixar, and it was just such a big revolutionary project that basically nothing like that was done before. It was so ambitious and so successful, and
Oh yeah, it
uh,
was definitely a one-off in the industry. There was no competitors. And I remember when I was at uni, because obviously we used to like exchange files. Oh, look what I found on Napster. Got all these references from things that are not being used anymore. Napster was, for the people that don't know, it was a sharing program where you could illegally download stuff. And basically there was
it's
this.
another one I read about, but I haven't
Of
experienced by
course, you never.
myself.
Yeah, I used to use it when I was in school, mate. We used to download music from that.
Mhm.
MP4, MP3s actually. Yeah, basically there was this short movie produced by Pixar, which I think was the introduction to Toy Story 1. It was called Jerry's Game. It was this old man playing chess with himself.
Yes, I know it.
And that
Yeah.
was mind blowing. I was like, wow, so this is 3D, and this is what kind of
Mhm.
helped me to understand how, think what things were achievable via the program I was using day in and day out. Because again, I didn't really have an image in my head of how this is applicable to work. I just didn't know. I just thought someone
Yeah.
would introduce me to a way of doing things.
Mhm.
And again, that's partially because Italy wasn't that advanced in terms of 3D.
Yeah.
I mean, even at the uni, we didn't have people saying, this is comp, this is how you do things, this is how you render stuff, this is how you model. I was one of the few in my course to just do 3D with a strictly 3D program we were doing. Since it was partially architecture and partially 3D, the
Mhm.
the accent was mostly on the architecture part. So we were doing CAD stuff mostly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Just just to explain briefly why I was so excited when you mentioned the chess short. It's because I remember, I don't know what film was it, but when I was young, it actually was before I went to cinema, and you had like sometimes before some films, shorts from Pixar. And I remember there was this one, and years after I found out that the director of that short was director called, I think, Jan Pinkava. And the interesting thing is that
Oh,
he's actually Czech, and it's quite a big deal because there isn't anyone as successful or big name from the Czech Republic. So that's when I found out, I was just like, wow, I would never expect that. So it was really cool. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened, but then he directed Ratatouille, but there was probably some disagreements and someone else took over. And afterwards, I don't know why, but he didn't direct anything else. But there's kind of a sentimental value to me because he was Czech. So I just wanted to
yeah,
explain
absolutely.
this.
Yeah, I didn't know he was Czech, the director. Absolutely. It looked amazing. Even the story was really nice because you don't realize he's playing with against himself
Mm-hmm.
until the end of the film. It was really, really nice.
Oh, spoiler, Marco! Come
Oh yeah,
on.
spoiler. Well, that's been around for 20 years. It's on you if you don't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really nice. Really nice short movie.
If you want to boost your online presence, check out our digital marketing agency called Trailblazed. You can also enroll in our Skillshare course called The 10 Tips on How to Succeed in Your Creative Career, which was inspired by the podcast. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter called Creative Spotlight to stay up to date with the show and more. Links are in the show notes. Thanks. Tell us, when did the idea to move to London come to you?
Right. So I was in Rome. I woke up from a nap and I said, I want to go to London to study or work. This is exactly how it happened. I'm not joking. My girlfriend can confirm. And
so
yes,
it actually helps, to sleep and you get ideas.
Possibly so.
When you're rested.
I must have seen it somewhere, and then I processed the idea. And I mean, to be honest, I was aware of the fact that probably there was no future for me then, and there was a really good judgment call on my part, because I knew loads of people that are now still struggling to find a job or to pay the bills, and that's because obviously there isn't this thriving market in the creative side of things. So yeah, basically I almost on a whim decided to go to London, and I had no idea. Now at this point I traveled once outside the country, which was in 2001. I went to Edinburgh for a few months to study. I couldn't speak a word of English. I had no concept or idea of what London was. Never been here. Nothing. So yeah, I decided.
And weren't you thinking about other countries or cities or something else?
Just London. I don't know why. Again, I must have been. I don't know. I remember my very first job as a freelancer was in 2006, something like that. And I worked with this company, doesn't exist anymore. And I basically did a 3D character of all things, of a graffiti piece from a really nice, a really good artist in Spain. It's called Berlin. And yeah, it was basically, my very first job. And the studio was based in Shoreditch. Again, never met the guy. We just spoke on Skype and MySpace as well. I think he found me. And yeah, I just did this job. Didn't get paid, which is nice. At the time, we used to do stuff.
Did you know that you were not going to get paid, or you didn't know?
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard or someone has ever uttered the phrase to you, "Oh, this is good exposure." At the time, we used to do stuff for good exposure. Yeah. Which is whenever I hear we don't have budget or this is good exposure, I just that's the end of the conversation for me to this day.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time I used to do stuff for free. Obviously, when you start, you don't really have a concept of how much you need to get paid, what your worth is, and all of that. So yeah, that was my very first. Actually, no, I'm lying. That's the second gig I ever had. The first one was in 2004. But yeah, that was my very first, I'd say, approach to all things London. And yeah, I decided to move when I was 24, 25. And I managed to find this freelance job with this company. They're still around in London. It's called Unit 9. It's part Italian, part British, and I started working with them. They had a branch in Florence, so I went there first. I did a few projects with them, and then I flew to London. Again, I had no idea what I was doing, literally no idea. I remember the first day, I just showed my portfolio. I didn't know I was getting the job. And I showed a portfolio to the guy that is now the CEO, and he said, "All right, that's your desk. is Davide is going to set up your computer. I'll see you later. It just went. By the way, we didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about day rate. I didn't know what day rate was, what national insurance, nothing. Absolutely nothing. They just put me to work. And the first job was for Adobe, which was a big one.
Wow.
Yeah,
it sounds big.
Yeah, it was for Adobe with a Zardid architecture studio. We created this. This thing is long gone. It's been shut down, but it was called the Adobe Museum. Basically, it was this digital space that only lived on the internet. It was a website. In fact, I think that my website is the only one on the internet that's got few renders of it. You can't find it anywhere. But yeah, I was basically at the time I was working with my laptop, and yeah, I was just doing my thing. I wasn't there, skilled. I was a super junior, but that was my very first job in London. And again, we're talking. Sorry, go on.
When moving over, what did you feel like? Were you excited, even though you didn't know anything, or were you scared, or both?
I was terrified. Now, just to give you a little glimpse of what it was. So, I came from a country where even doors open in a different way. They open from outside in, whilst doors here open from inside out. Cars, obviously, different driving places and all that. So I remember trying my very first cab I tried to get into not the passenger seat, but from the other side, and the guy goes, "What are you doing?" Didn't speak a word of English, so communication was really tough. Again, everything was different. We're talking about different currency. You need to find a place. My first place I used to live at was in Willesden Green, and it was an attic where it used to rain inside from the ceiling. So my first night I had to duct tape a sponge on the ceiling, because it basically I just I think it was rain. It was basically dripping on the carpet.
So on the first day, you experienced proper traditional London weather on the first day.
It was incredible. It's the fact that I've been sleeping in an attic for a couple of weeks, and then I managed to find a place, and then I found another one. So conditions initially weren't optimal. And I remember moving here, and I only had £1,200. So if that was gone, I had to go back to wherever I was from. And obviously, I was a freelancer. Freelancer is probably too big of a word. At the time, I was an intern / freelancer. I remember this company paid me much later, when I was supposed to leave my employment. So it wasn't a payment, it was weekly or monthly. So yeah, that's partially my fault, because again, I wasn't that aware of the work conditions and how things were supposed to be defined at the start. But I mean, you live and you learn, I suppose. And again, that was my very first job, and I was just thrown into it. And from there, I just decided to pursue freelancing and permanent, just bouncing in between the two, really. And yeah.
Yeah. So, how long you stayed in that job, actually?
Right. So that lasted, I think, something like 8 months, and then after that, I managed to start working with this company. They're still around. It's called Fluent. Amazing guy, amazing director, Remy Williams, which started to give me, gigs and 3D based projects. So I was doing asset building, which is a thing I do to this day as well. Amazing guy again. Is I would say the very first one that trusted me, and that's not to say that obviously that came with problems, because more trust. You need to be able to handle your projects and stuff. But after that, I managed to. Obviously, I was running short on money because freelancing wasn't as uniform and fixed. I had to find some other source of income that was more stable. So I managed to join this company that was working in digital media, meaning mostly doing banners and posters for film. So that was my very first, I would say, glimpse of the film industry. And I was doing banners all day. So, when you go on the website and you see tiny banners, animated ones, and those are the first thing you close. This is what I was doing. So I was doing
Those annoying
that.
ones, I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, exactly. And the mind-blowing stuff is that now I work in the film industry on a more consistent way. And I've never been to a premiere or anything since I started to actually do the film stuff. And at the time I was doing banners, I was going to premieres every week. So the very first premiere I went to, I didn't even know what a premiere was. They basically told me.
Yeah.
So imagine I moved to London 4 months. No, it was 8 months before. And they basically told me, right, today we're going to the premiere of Red with Ellen Mirren and Bruce Willis. What do you want to do? Do you want to come with us? All right, let's go. And I went there and we had the red. Imagine I was there with my rucksack after a day of work and we went on the red carpet. And there's a video of this. I literally walked past Ellen Mirren, which was giving interviews.
Really?
And I didn't even know where I was. I was just, all right, Bruce Willis is here. Let's watch this film. And that was Red.
Oh my god.
I think
Yeah.
it was in 2010.
But how such company gets these tickets? How is it possible?
Because we used to, our main client was Fox, were actually Fox and Warner. So we used to work with Fox and Warner, and the distributions of this film are usually Fox, Paramount, Warner. We used to work with all these companies, and yeah, basically we used to do PR and digital media in bulk, I would say. So here's a poster for the film, here's a banner. We used to do thousands of banners, which is something that, repetition is something that kills me to this day. We used to repeat the same task over and over again because obviously I remember one day, Natalie Portman, we were working on Black Swan, and we did hundreds of banners for Black Swan, like literally every possible size you can think of. And then one day Natalie Portman wins the Golden Globe. So the client wants the Golden Globe logo in every single banner we did. So I had to redo, I'm not joking, probably 50 banners just to amend them. And again, repetition is my kryptonite to this day.
Okay.
But yeah, it wasn't. It was a steady source of income. It just wasn't as creative as I wanted my job to be. So one day I remember I couldn't do it anymore. So I decided to take a day off and I went to an exhibition of Gustav Klimt. And I came out of there.
But Marco, before we move on, let me ask you, with those banners, how does such a process look like? What is it like? How much creativity have you got? How long you spent on it? How do you know what to do?
Not very creative, I would say. Again, I appreciate that there was something that had to be done. By the way, they are, I wouldn't say long gone, but they are used less and less as a digital media, because again, people tend to skip them. In terms of creation, we used to basically create them in Photoshop, just have the static version, and then you import them in a program called Flash, which I think today is called Animate. but yeah, I was basically forced to learn ActionScript 2, which is the coding language that allows you to, well, at the time allows you to move and animate the banners. But the movements are really simple. So imagine you just take a crop of a face from the poster, you just move it, zoom in and out. So it was very, very. And again, at the time, I was itching to do 3D and do cool stuff, and yeah, there weren't having any of it. I was trying to introduce.
And how long does it take to create, let's say, one banner?
Minutes, mate. It's just
really,
yeah. It's super easy. In a morning, you can possibly do 5 or 6. It's just we're talking about really small formats as well.
And do they tell you like, follow this, these elements needs to be there, or you suggest few ideas and go from there?
That's the other thing that I suppose I resented the most, is the fact that not only it wasn't a creative task per se, but you were also told how to do the stuff, so that it didn't leave you any possible leeway to come up with your creative interpretation, which is something that I do a lot these days, fortunately. But yeah, it's just it wasn't as creative and fulfilling a job as I wanted to. But yeah, the place was nice.
And still a great reward to be on a premieres.
Yeah, that's we went to literally tens of premieres. I still have the tickets, and that's because obviously,
if you want to flex, name some premieres and people.
I went to the last 2 Harry Potters, and the thing that struck me the most is the fact that basically the red carpet was contoured by tens of people that basically camped at night, and I remember they had this barriers, and I could see the heads of kids popping behind the barriers because they wanted to see if they could have a glimpse of the actors walking in the red carpet. And the red carpet was so big, it went from Trafalgar Square to the Empire Cinema, so it goes all the way to Leicester Square. Which I understand if you're not alive, that doesn't really make sense. But yeah, that was.
I was gonna ask you if the premieres were at Leicester or what cinemas it was.
They were usually in Leicester Square in the Empire Cinema or Odeon, and the last Harry Potter one was really, really nice. It was just I remember it was such a grand, pompous event, and I just remember the thing I remember the most is just literally kids as far as the eye could see behind the barriers. And the barriers were covered with posters, and they just had this gap below them. So you just see basically heads of kids. As you were walking, you could see just heads looking at you and scream. And I was just, I still am nobody. I was just going to the Harry Potter premieres. I had no idea. And it's just because I did banners, and it's incredible that oftentimes we get to work on movies. We don't really see the glamorous side of the premiere. We don't really go to premieres. If anything, we see them in a cast and crew, showing.
And did you even get to take a picture or autogram, or you weren't even interested, or it wasn't possible?
I remember, again, I didn't have a social media at the time, but it's just I had a flip phone, I remember. But I remember this colleague of mine took a video of us walking in the red carpet. It's just, that's the thing that struck me the most. But I remember going to another one. I think it was the first Kingsman. And I took my girlfriend with me, which was a big fan of Take That when she was like 12 or 13. And Howard from Take That walked past her. Literally, she couldn't believe it. So yeah, it was so bizarre because it's not something you tend to do every day. It's just, it was really, really, really weird. But it was nice. And again,
and especially if you say you moved just a few months ago with, not a really clear direction, or you didn't know what's going to happen, and a few months after, it's on
Absolutely.
premiere of the biggest films in the world with the
Absolutely. So
stars.
it's just, it was so strange. So strange. I remember once we went to the Expandables premiere, and I remember there was a photo kind of occasion to go there and take a picture with Dolph Lundgren. And it was such a strange feeling. Again, imagine you just arrived in a place, you don't know left and right, you know nothing about anything. And it's just me. I remember taking this picture with me shaking the hand of Dolph Lundgren, which I grew up with.
True.
Yeah, watching Rocky.
Hmm.
It was just so
Yeah,
so
it sounds
bizarre.
awesome.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
yeah. No, so
And
I'm
it's
not.
interesting. What's the word? A paradox that it happened to you before, and now, like, or before working on these big films, it doesn't happen
Absolutely,
anymore.
absolutely. Again, it's so strange because at the time I didn't really contribute to the final product. It's just that it's
Hmm.
something I could only appreciate, and I remember how amazing it was to watch the. Because sometimes doing posters, they give you like a frame of the film, and you base the poster on that. And it was so amazing to
Hmm.
see the level of craft that goes into a film and the VFX. But I wasn't really doing that. I was just, just marginally contributing to the release of the film. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, at some point I decided enough was enough. I needed my creative juices flowing again, um, and I decided to leave.
So, what were your steps? Where did you go to, or what was the plan?
Right. So after that, I decided to pursue a freelance career, and basically started snowballing from there. From the first gig, you basically continue and you never stop. After I left my permanent employer as a digital media artist, probably too big of a word, but yeah, you know what I mean. I started freelancing and working with all sorts of VFX houses in London, but mostly for commercial. So Jellyfish Pictures was one of them. Fugitive Studios, which doesn't exist anymore. Spav and all these other studios, and Fluent and Imagination, which are again I'm super grateful for. Because they are powerhouses in their own right. They do commercial work mostly, sometimes film work, but I mean they've been absolutely amazing to me. So I was mostly
And
doing commercial, yes.
can you say how tough was it for you to find a job in these houses? Because it's we all know that it's quite competitive and hard to get in. So, did you have a good portfolio, or did you still struggle to find a job back then?
Yeah, initially it was hard in the sense that obviously all I had was just years of banners. Because bear in mind, I've been doing banners and posters for possibly 3 years. I was doing 3D on the side, um, sometimes freelancing, but um, I've always been attached to the 3D side of things. Obviously, I wasn't allowed to do it in my day-to-day job, so I just decided to leave that permanent job because I wanted to do 3D on a more solid basis. But I didn't have much to show in terms of fully finished projects. Or I suppose one thing that counts the most is the fact that you have a project that has been released under the name of some famous studio and stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of solid proof that you can work in a team, or you have been working in a team. At the time, I didn't have that, so we are talking about 12 years ago. So I
Mhm.
kind of had to. Well, first of all, I've always done my personal work on the side, so I had a lot of characters, a lot of 3D, a lot of assets. They just weren't industry standard. Um, So that was possibly
Do you say industry standard? Does it mean the quality of the
yes, the quality.
industry, or what do you mean?
Obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, it's much different to present one asset as fully finished as it can be, or a full commercial with shots and comp and stuff like that, which is something that obviously catches the eye much more than one character. And at the moment, that's what I had. I just had stuff that was like self-produced, possibly not as refined. And yeah, this is what I had in terms of portfolio. I had loads of bits and pieces like this, so it was a bit hard to find a job at first. But I mean, the good thing of freelancing is it's very meritocratic. So if you can show you're able to be a valuable member of the team, they tend to call you back, or they tend to give you other gigs with word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that was my.
What software were you using? Was it still with Cinema 4D, or were you already
Yes,
learning something
yeah.
new? Yeah.
Cinema 4D has been a constant. Again, it blows my mind that I'm still using the same program. And
You must be master. Is there something you don't know about the software?
yeah, there's always something you don't know, because obviously new releases tend to add new things. But yeah, I started with version 7.5, and now we are over 27, I think. Version 27. Oh, no, it's got
True.
the release of the year. But yeah, it's just it blows my mind. It kind of feels familiar to me. It's something you grow up with, kind of. So you know how to move around. It's just like Maya. It feels familiar.
Yeah.
And this is something that I still use to this day. But yeah, I mean, once I started freelancing, I started getting closer and closer to the world of TV and movies. I remember my very first freelance gig was for a TV show called Gold Rush, which you probably have heard about. Basically, miners that are
Something
looking for
with
gold.
mining. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Very easy to spot. But yeah, basically that was my very first gig, and I just went on from there. And the very first gig I did in movie was with this company that doesn't exist anymore. It's called Fugitive, and it was for the son of Ridley Scott was doing was really, I think it was his first film. It's called Morgan, and we had to create
Can you spell it? What is it?
Morgan. Morgan. It was a
Morgan,
very dystopian kind of film. It was really nice, and we had to do UIs and graphics, screen graphics, which is something that I ended up doing a lot in the coming years.
What are UIs? User
UIs
interface?
are basically user interfaces. Yes, or I mean UI. Everything qualifies. I mean, the things that qualify as UI are those numbers and things flickering on the screen that you see in the background of films. Whenever someone looks at a screen, you've got nice colorful animations, and those are usually done in After Effects and Cinema 4D. And I was really lucky to, after I worked on Morgan, work on other film, doing UIs and contributing to film, doing UIs. UIs, I would say, are the first thing I've done. Yeah, sorry.
Let me ask you, I'm curious, because if you work as a freelancer, in what scenarios does the company hire you? Is it when they are short on people, short on staff, or if they have their own people, why do they still go for freelancers?
I see. Yeah, no, that's a good question. Some companies are, I mean, they're called sponge companies because they tend to expand depending on the project and on the tasks. Obviously, sometimes you have multiple projects in, and no matter how many people you have in the company, you still need an extra help from outsiders, possibly freelancers. So I tend to work with companies that do just that. Basically, I worked a lot with companies like Territory Studio, and they work a lot with freelancers. Great company. Again, and that's because most of the time you have multiple projects in, and you can't have all permanent stuff, because once the project is done, you need to be able to, dismiss the contracts of freelancers and go back to your normal workforce. So I would say this is the main reason why companies call freelancers in. And then it gives you a bit of freedom in terms of, how many people you want in your studio, how many projects you want to take in. Sometimes you probably not having as many projects in, therefore you need less people. And hiring freelancers kind of gives you that flexibility, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, talking about the Morgan, the film you worked on, was that your first? Did you get your first credit in that one?
Nope. In that instance, the directors of the company were so charitable to basically give us the work and take the credit for it. So they just
that's nice.
And me and another guy did the work for it. But yeah, no, I'm not salty about it. It happens sometimes.
But were you happy with the end result?
Yeah, it was nice. It was. I mean, in my case, it was just one shot, but it was really cool. It was really cool to see stuff on screen. I'm not sure that was released in cinemas. It must have been though. But yeah, Ridley Scott was executive producer, and his son was director. So yeah, that was my very first movie gig, we can say.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what were the next ones, or what other projects did you have after?
After that, it was a bunch of commercial work, which is usually what pays the bills for freelancers. You are doing damage control most of the time. You show up, you do the work, you fix stuff, and you leave. And I was very fortunate to work with companies like The Mill and Territory Studio, and loads of other companies. Really sorry, the names escape me now. Spav, a lot of other companies like this. But the biggest one I had after Morgan was Ghost in the Shell. I was really lucky to be part of the team that worked on Ghost in the Shell at Territory Studio, and the
Netflix film.
Now it's on Netflix, but that was released in cinemas.
It's with Scarlett Johansson.
Yes. That was a really cool project. To this day, it's one of the coolest I worked on. Basically, we had to create this thing called solograms, which are, I don't know if you've seen the film, but it's based on this dystopian city, and there are this massive, I would say, almost commercial billboards, but they are holographic. So you have, I don't know, there's a billboard for a doctor's office, and you have this hologram 3D scan of the doctor's office, and I don't know, you've got a drum academy, and there's this massive drum animating, and we had to do just that. So basically, Rupert Sanders, the director, came up with this idea of having this slightly Blade Runner-esque, assets peppered in the city
style theme,
and we had to create loads of them. We had to create loads of them, animate them, texture them. It was amazing, and it was just literally, this is your project, you do what you want, and then you show us. And we had to do so many of them that there was such a creative, possibility for the designers to come up with their own interpretation and stuff. And it's amazing because you really see it in the film that you can't miss it. Sometimes they're so big. And yeah, that was and I got the credit for that. What you asked.
Oh, I was, yeah. How did it feel like? Did you go to cinema to
I
see
couldn't
it?
believe it. So again, to this day, I remember a colleague of mine, something like 10 years ago, told me, "Oh, I've been working in film for so many years. After a while, you don't really pay attention to what you do. Everything is the same," and that can't be further from the truth. I mean, I still get blown away by the releases, and I'm very fortunate to take part in. I still have a sense of pride. I'm still super happy to see my work and my colleagues' work. It's still amazing. I mean, as I always say, you must have heard me saying this in the past. It still amazes me that I get paid to do monsters all day, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you work on it for such a long time, and it's literally like your child working on it for hours every day. So it's a nice sense of accomplishment if you get to see your name there.
Absolutely, and it's the fact. I mean, again, it's not just the credit; it's the fact that it's cemented in history. Like if you watch the same film in 20 years' time, you can still say, "I've done that." If that day, the day I've done that thing, I wasn't in a mood, or I wasn't as skilled as I was supposed to be in that very moment, that would have come out differently. Again, I really think that people don't fully appreciate the time it takes and how many steps there are for each and everything we create that they finally see on screen. I mean, it pains me sometimes when critics kind of blast the film and they just reduce everything to, "Oh, that film is trash, it's horrible, they shouldn't have done it." It's just, imagine how many thousands of people spend thousands of hours on that. It's just, imagine the time they devolved on that. And
I can completely relate. I would never expect that either, but time, resources, even budget, hours, and everything spent on it, and then you see it maybe for a few seconds. Sometimes you don't even see it.
Oh yeah.
And people who don't experience it have no idea. So it's
absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but I still think that we are super fortunate to do what we do.
Absolutely.
And we still need to feel a sense of pride. Because again, it's just it's incredible. It's incredible to work on stuff like this.
Yeah, and also let me ask you, what are some differences between working on commercials to working on films?
I see. Yeah, commercial work is, first of all, the deadlines are really, really strict, and then they're super short. Whilst in a film environment, you could possibly have months to create, say, a character or an asset. It is just in commercial, it's just the timeline is incredibly short, and you have to come up with your
Would it be
own.
like weeks or months?
In the best of scenarios, you have a couple of months, but that's like really rich. Like you have to be super lucky. I've just finished a trailer, which I can't talk about, but all in all, it took a month and a half for a minute and 25 seconds. Which is nothing. Now, commercial work entails that you take care of the whole thing most of the time by yourself. So the difference between VFX and commercial is that in VFX, there are different compartments, like different For example, the department of comp takes care of just the comp, so it's compartmentalized. If you're a modeler, you rarely see the other side of things of look there, unless you can do that, of course. But commercial is not like that. Commercial is, this is a shot, do the shot, I'll see you in a week. So they don't care that you're not as proficient in some fields. The client expects the job to be done. Whilst in VFX, again, it's super fractioned in modeling department, build department, comp department, look there, groom. The times I had to do illustration, look there, groom, animation, rig. It's just, you do everything. They tend to ask for the final products, not the single stages, which is, it can be a bit daunting sometimes, but I suppose it kind of helps you to grow as a professional. Again, if you wanna grow in terms of skills, freelancing is, I've been saying this for years, is the best thing you can approach, because they throw so many things at you all at once and you don't know what to expect every time. Sometimes you show up in a studio and they ask you for things that you were not supposed to know, because again, your portfolio probably doesn't scream rigging, but that's what they want done, and that's what you have to do.
So then it's up to you to learn it and just do the job.
Absolutely. Again, I'm fortunate in the sense that the programs I use are programs I've been using for almost in some cases, more than 2 decades. So even if that particular thing I probably have never done myself, I'm sure with a couple of tutorials I can get a full grasp of it. I'm not absolutely fresh, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose. But so it's quite different from VFX. You can really, do stuff that you haven't done before and progress and learn new skills every day.
And can you say, is there one you prefer or enjoy more, whether it's working freelance and doing kind of everything, or working in a company and focusing on specific area?
I suppose, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been lucky to work in one of the best VFX companies in the world, and I really, really enjoyed it. The level of talent is just off the charts, and I really felt part of a family. So that's probably the dehumanizing thing of freelancing. You just show up, you do the work, and then you leave. So you don't hang around as much. And that's what I really missed, I think. And definitely, I really enjoyed being part of a more permanent role. And definitely, yes, I wouldn't mind going back to it. Yeah.
And with freelancing, does that also happen that you develop a relationship with specific companies and then work for them later as well?
Yes,
really?
They tend to have their roster of people they keep calling in, because obviously when you show you can do the job, you tend to be called in more and more often. It's just that what I suppose freelancing lacks is the caliber of projects. It's very, very unlikely you're going to be on a film project if you're a freelancer. It's just because the film pipeline is much more complex and it will take you months to just get a grasp of it. Whilst commercial, it's just, we need to do this, do it. We don't care how. So I would say a feature film is more, it kind of entails longer stints, longer contracts, whilst freelancing is more, or commercial at least, is more, here and there. But I much prefer film. It's much more fun. We got much more time to work on your your asset. And yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's continue with your journey. Where did you go to from Ghost in a Shell?
After Ghost in the Shell, which again was amazing. I loved amazing team, amazing people. I got
And
called.
sorry, just quick question: did you know the manga or the original? I'm not sure if it's based on manga. I'm
No,
sorry, but the original.
I didn't see the cartoon. My girlfriend did, and I remember they didn't really tell me. I don't remember if they told me what the project was. They just said, because they saw my portfolio, and in my portfolio I had manga-esque characters in 3D, which by sheer chance, that's exactly what they were looking for. Someone that was versatile enough to do assets and characters and do as many as possible in a short space of time. But basically, I didn't. I was aware of the film, the cartoon, but I never watched it. My girlfriend did, and she was blown away when I said, "Oh, well, I'm going to work on Ghost in the Shell," and she couldn't believe it. And I really liked the movie. I really liked it. The final result is really, really punchy. Really
I
cool.
don't remember that well, but I think the visuals, because it was such a sci-fi, I think maybe even what do you call it? Cyberpunk like,
Yes,
maybe?
a
That
bit.
looked really
That
cool.
kind of
Yeah.
dictated graphics for a few months after the release because people were so impressed by the way it looked and the companies that were involved in the film. It was really nice. I really loved it. I really enjoyed the film. But yeah, to answer your question, after that, if I remember correctly, I was hired by another amazing powerhouse of a company, MPC. And that was great. It was still in commercial. I was in MPC Motion, which is now the Mill. And then after a few months of doing commercial work, I was transferred in the 3D side of things, 3D department, and I worked on a couple of commercials doing characters, which was really great and really fulfilling because the team was amazing. I mean, there's such amazing talent. And yeah.
Are there some big names or big clients that you can mention?
Yeah. Well, in commercial, I worked for MTV. Well, it spans from KFC to MTV, really. It's just, it depends whatever.
Oh, so like
Whatever comes
the
in.
well-known brands. Yeah.
Audi,
Okay.
MTV, names like this. It was really great. And then when I was transferred in 3D, I got to do this amazing bunch of commercials for Volkswagen, and we created this goat character with massive horns. And I was really lucky to work on that character as well. So it was great, and they were coming off the success of I think it was Waitrose commercial or John Lewis commercials. I don't know if you've ever seen the one of the dog bouncing on the
No.
bouncy. It's
But
really cool.
it made me curious. I will check your website and portfolio
absolutely.
again after this.
It was really great. And again, that wasn't a project I was part of, but the team was exactly the same and they were really, really good. But yeah, I was lucky to join that team. And after that, I was called back at Territory Studio, which is the place I did Ghost in the Shell at. And they said they had this massive projects they needed people to help out. And I decided to leave MPC and go back to Territory Studio for, I think it was a good 6 to 7 months. And that was for Pacific Rim Uprising.
Oh wow!
And that was.
I love that film.
Oh, you like it? All right.
Yes, but not. I know that it was. I'm not sure if the first one or the second one was a bit probably box office flop, and not critically acclaimed, but because I enjoy these movies with creatures and robots, and the idea that they're fighting against each other, it's like Transformers and Godzilla or something, just so cool for me. So I like.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's basically a Godzilla-esque. I mean, the first one was created by Del Toro.
Working for
which is
such a big name, that's
a genius.
something.
The second one was he wasn't involved, and Stephen DeKnight was the director. I enjoyed that enormously. It was amazing. It was like 6 to 7 months, and they gave me the interiors of a whole robot. That was the case of, this is the thing, do it. And there was a mixture of animation, UI, modeling, texturing, everything you can think of. And the result is pretty good. I'm still using it to this day in my portfolio. I'm really proud of that. And the team was amazing. The team at Territory Studio is really, really talented. So yeah, after that, what did I do after that? I just did commercial.
Marco, did you like the film or didn't you like the film?
Oh yeah, it was amazing. It was this is one, as you said before, is one of those instances I've been, absolutely flabbergasted by, seeing your own work on screen. Just I can't believe that. And that was possibly the very first time that my work wasn't just marginal. It was basically in every shot. You didn't miss it. My work and my colleagues' work, of course. So yeah, that was
literally like your child.
Yeah, the very first time you claim I did that. It's just out of the box. This is what it is. And the weird thing is that our client at the time, as a Territory Studio, was the studio I ended up working with for 3 years, DNA. So they were popping in quite often to check our work, because they were the main vendor in Pacific Rim. So that was my I suppose my first contact with DNA, which was great. And yeah, after that, it's just it's been commercial work for a while, and interspersed with feature film, but again not as much, because again when you're a freelancer, you tend to do more commercial work instead of movies and stuff. But yeah, I was really lucky to work after that on Men in Black, just doing UIs, and Mission Impossible, again doing UIs. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but yeah, in general, I was really lucky to work on a few film and video game projects, doing motion design and modeling, and just being a 3D generalist.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, get in touch to provide your feedback, or share any ideas for future guests. Thank you, and see you soon.